So our Game It Out 3 is on the sales misconduct at Wells Fargo Community Bank. We use the framework of create a sales-centered culture. Our first decision node relates to the 2004 gaming report. The options were to not act, take some action, or take full action. Ultimately, they chose to not take any action, despite this report indicating that a sales-centered culture could lead to problems in the future. The interdependence we see here is from the board. No action means no increased expenses or remedial action. There are two biases associated with this decision. There's naive realism. They had a proven track record of success, and the idea that there could be a future issue coming from what was leading to their success clearly was from someone not looking at the proven results in their minds. Along the same note, they experienced anchoring bias, where the success blinded them to being open to the potential problems described in the gaming report. The second decision node relates to the 2007 Tolls being promoted to executive vice president and head of community bank, despite two ignored letters of complaint and concern to her and the administration. The choices were to acknowledge the letters, promote another employee, or to promote Tolst, and they chose to promote her. The interdependence we see here is the stakeholders, because it's going to be under new leadership. There are three biases associated with this decision. Semi-Lewis reflex, which rejects the letters of complaint because she was bringing so much success and was becoming such a notable figure publicly. There was naive realism, where there was a pretty large public acceptance that she was a remarkable leader and one of Wells Fargo's keys to success. These letters were taken as an outlier and not to be considered. The third bias would be the illusion of asymmetric insight. With the public presence and success backing up their opinions, they viewed the opinions as superior to those expressed in the letters. The third decision node relates to community bank's sales strategy that focused on cross-selling. Employees were encouraged to sell customer additional products such as credit cards or loans. The options for this decision were to focus on quality, customer service, or cross-selling, and they chose to focus on cross-selling. The interdependence we see here is customers. They got additional products to meet their needs. There were two biases that were associated with this decision. There was overestimation, where Wells Fargo believed that they would be able to sell more products to customers than they potentially really even needed. And the second would be the illusion of asymmetric insight, having the employees push more products that the customers did not know that they needed and potentially did not really need.
The next decision node relates to the acquisition of Wachovia. In 2008, Wells Fargo acquired Wachovia, moving it from the West to the entire US, which doubled its number of branches. And the decisions here would be to acquire a different company, improve the quality in existing banks, or acquire Wachovia. And in this case, they acquired Wachovia, and the stakeholders were strategically interdependent on this decision, because a bigger investment meant bigger opportunities. And the biases related to this decision, one would be appeal to novelty. So when banks merge, the parent changes the subservient bank to be more like them. Second being channel factors. So Wells Fargo boasted leading sales figures industry-wide, which expanded their growth across the country. And lastly, expert intuition. Wells Fargo saw the opportunity to expand and grow, which ultimately allowed them to dominate a new sector of sales, which they did seize that opportunity. The next decision node relates to sales campaigns that management put special emphasis on sales through higher than normal quotas and goals, and these goals were met with special rewards if they were exceeded. So the decisions there would be to change the expectations of sales, keep the existing expectation, or eliminate sales campaigns. And in this case, they increased the sales using incentives. And employees were able to get special rewards, and management was able to achieve higher revenue in accounts. For this decision, goal visibility was one of the biases, which was the special rewards were incentives to be unethical, which inflated sales figures, and hyperbolic discounting, which management had a stronger preference for immediate payoffs for sales goals during sales campaigns rather than goals outside of the campaign. And the next decision node relates to the results, which were reviewed in daily conference calls. So if managers didn't meet their goals, they were chastised and embarrassed in front of 60 plus managers. So the decisions here would be to send an email on expectations, meet individually, and in this case, they decided to ridicule managers daily when goals weren't met. And the group that was interdependent was upper level management. So they were able to review results and set examples under performers to prevent more. And the biases here related to this decision are the Pygmalion effect. So embarrassing employees publicly was something that all managers were doing, so others may have joined in regardless of how they felt about it. And the cheerleader effect. So instead of upper level management meeting independently to discuss expectations, it was more appealing to chastise them in a group.
The next decision node was based on promotions. So promotions were based on which employees were achieving aggressive sales performance. And because of that, they would be promoted to sales managers. The alternate decisions that could have been made would be to promote internally based on managerial ability and experience, or to fill promotional positions using external candidates. The key strategic interdependence on this node are lower level employees, because this incentivized them to increase sales because then they could look forward to promotions. The heuristics and biases on this node are in group favoritism, because you wanted to promote within the group. Social comparison bias, because this promoted rampant competitiveness amongst employees in order to meet sales quotas to then get promoted. This also reinforced anchoring bias, because this solidified the idea that sales would lead to promotions. The next decision node focused on how managers were being moved to locations where sales performance needed improvement. By moving these managers to lower performing locations, they were able to spread the idea of aggressive sales tactics. Alternatively, they could have provided additional training to lower performing locations, or they could have chosen to close the locations that were underperforming. This affected all employees, and it raised the expectation for higher sales performance. The heuristics and biases outlined on this node are illusion of control, due to the fact that they believed that sales managers would be the ones to solely improve locations. Herd behavior was also apparent, because you would hope that the people around the sales managers would begin to act like them, therefore improving sales. And also goal visibility, because these people, these sales managers, were known for their sales performance. It showed that the goal is in sight and all employees can reach that goal. The next decision node focused on minimum sales thresholds. So employees at the branch, district, and regional levels, including managers and higher executives, had to clear minimum sales thresholds and rank properly to qualify for incentive pay. Incentive pay could have been achieved if the threshold was lowered or if there had been no threshold for incentive pay, but Wells Fargo decided to move forward with minimum sales thresholds. This affected upper level management because they had to review all staff performance in order to assure that minimum thresholds were met. The heuristics and biases in this case were social comparison bias, because this again created a lot of competitiveness between employees, and in-group favoritism, because once again, you would want to you would favor the members within your group for incentive pay. The next decision node was that senior leaders were reluctant to extend more focus on quality of sales for fear that it might adversely impact the financial performance of Community Bank. So alternatively, they could have focused on sales quality, or they could have chosen to have no goals, but they did decide to continue to focus on the quantity of sales versus the quality. This also affected upper level management because they were forced to maintain the current levels of financial performance, which often led to poor decisions. The heuristics and biases in this node were a familiarity heuristic, because members within this company were already familiar with these sales strategies. So they would choose to focus on what's familiar over what is unknown. The base rate fallacy was also key, because even though, poor decisions were starting to pop up throughout the company, they were chosen to ignore that information because they thought that it would lead them to additional sales. And confirmation bias was also apparent, because this reinforced the idea that quantity in sales was more important over the quality.
So this node deals with retribution from managers. The options for this were to have employees engage in fraudulent behavior in order to meet sales goals. This affected the employees who were creating accounts, hoping that it would count towards their sales goals. The heuristics and biases for this would be that the employees suffered from outcome bias because they thought they would be able to create false accounts and have it work in their favor. Because of this, they need to keep up the appearance of successful sales. They often endured status quo bias, and mood congruence came into play in this node as managers baited employees with the fear of retribution for underperformance. The next node deals with Eldahan and her speaking out against the company. So the options for this one, she spoke to the LA Times about the things that were happening in the company, hoping to have things come to light that had not already been. So this was, I'm sorry, I'm not talking well today. So this affected the employees. She was hoping to have the potential to create a better, healthier culture in the company. So the heuristics and biases for this are illusory correlation, which can be likened to coincidence. Eldahan believed that the LA Times article was the catalyst for her termination when she was told that it was the issuance of a bad loan. There was hindsight bias by management because they felt that El Dahan should have known that the customer that she gave the loan to was a default risk. And disrupting the status quo meant losing sales. So firing El Dahan prevented any further whistleblowing that could disrupt the status quo. So this node talks about community bank changing their sales expectations to prevent further unethical behavior. So this affected the employees because they were no longer under the pressure to meet sales goals that were really out of reach. The heuristics and biases for this node involve cognitive dissonance. The high pressure and unethical behavior was becoming known to the public. That would deter future sales for new customers. We have a commitment bias. Wells Fargo needed to commit to changing their sales expectations because they were at risk of perpetuating reputational damage. And then we have the action bias. Wells Fargo took action on their known unethical behavior to attempt to correct and prevent any reoccurrence to secure their future and their sales and reputation. So with this, we found that the temporal portfolio propensity gave them a propensity toward high discounting.